It's been called one of the worst cases of government abuse ever committed against a homeschooling family. The abduction by Swedish authorities of Dominic Johansson, a happy, healthy 7-year-old boy taken from his parents in 2009 as they waited to leave Sweden on a flight to India. After the abduction, the Dominic Johansson story spread quickly on the internet. But 3 years later, the family is still not reunited, and Swedish authorities keep finding new reasons why this young man cannot go home. Dominic is the only child of Christer and Annie Johansson, who live on the island of Gotland in the Baltic Sea. This is the first television interview they've given about what was done to them.
And this is about the most fundamental right that you have. You have the right to your own children. You should have.
In 2008, Christer and Annie were making plans to leave Sweden to do humanitarian work in Annie's native India. So they decided it would be best for Dominic to be homeschooled in the final months before their departure. Christer says the Ministry of Education told him they could homeschool, but local officials began to levy fines and threaten them. Then, as they sat on a plane at Stockholm Airport for their scheduled trip to India, police came aboard and took Dominic away. The family was traumatized. Annie collapsed. Dominic, in police custody, started throwing up.
Then he threw up until they transported him to the ER.
I can just hear the screams of my child. My child had no clue, and I have no clue still what's going on.
Christer says they were told that Dominic would be returned in a few days. But when they went to pick him up, authorities had changed their story. They decided that Dominic was at risk. What risk? He had cavities, and he did not have every recommended vaccination. And they said he was shy. As weeks and months went by, Gotland Social Services started finding more problems. They said the Johanssons' home did not have enough furniture. They said Christer was a drug addict, even though he passed a drug test. They said Christer has mental illness, even though he passed a psychiatric exam.
And I took that paper to court, and it had no effect whatsoever. I said, I'm healthy, but the social services lawyer and the social services said that, no, you are suffering from personality disorders and this and that.
Social services said Dominic was developmentally delayed, although here he was flying a plane on Flight Simulator before being abducted at age 7, and also speaking perfect English about the problem with television.
If you see too much TV, you'll get dark under your eyes. If you get dark under your eyes, you will smile too much.
Social Services was also disturbed that Dominic was too affectionate with other children, greeting his friends with a hug and a kiss on the cheek. They called this deviant behavior. And Christer says they've decided that he's a so-called human rights fanatic because he talks about his human rights as a parent.
They just told me several times I'm a human rights fanatic. It sounds so funny.
A human rights fanatic.
Yeah.
Authorities have resisted all attempts to reunite this family, and evidence showing that Annie and Christer are good parents has been completely ignored.
It doesn't matter if we have professors or doctors to speak for us. It just doesn't matter. It's only their opinion.
Exasperated, Christer brought Dominic home without permission in November 2010. Police raided their home with guns and dogs and took Dominic away again, and Christer got 2 months in jail.
The Dominic Johansson, I mean, that's the home education tragedy of Sweden.
Jonas Himmelstrand heads the Swedish Homeschooling Association.
I believe this is just simply a mistake. They did not realize that they were not allowed to take a child on homeschooling charges alone. So after they took him, they invented all kinds of other reasons. And also pride, I think, which is quite well known among Swedish authorities, that once they've made a mistake, never to admit it.
It is astonishing to me that free governments who've heard about this have not done more.
Michael Donnelly is an attorney for the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which is helping the Johanssons. He compares the Swedish government's behavior to the Soviet Union.
This local government, backed up now by Swedish courts, have demonstrated that they are capable of visiting the most despicable totalitarian acts on their citizens, reminiscent of the Soviet Union and communist countries in recent history.
Annie and Christer were only allowed to visit Dominic for 1 hour every 5 weeks. But now that has stopped. A boy who so obviously loved his parents before the abduction now says he no longer wants to see them.
We haven't had any contact with him since November 2010, not a phone call.
Not one.
We don't know how he is, we don't know anything.
Annie, who has a master's degree, suffered an emotional breakdown after the abduction and now suffers from panic attacks when she talks about what happened. The Gotland Social Services Board has told the media that secrecy prevents them from discussing the case. But Sweden's ambassador to the United States has defended the government's conduct. The Johanssons' attorney Ruby Harold Clayson says the police abduction of Dominic from the plane was illegal, and another hearing is scheduled for May. But these photos before and after the abduction show what Krister describes as a boy broken into a million pieces. Krister and Annie can only hope this nightmare will end.
Who can live without their children?
You can't live.
You can't. How can you live without a devastated life? In fact, devastated everything.
Dale Hurd, CBN News, in Gotland, Sweden.